people notice it first in others: the impulsive reactions, the emotional shortcuts, the refusal to take responsibility. It looks like immaturity, overreactions, drama where patience should exist, patterns easy to criticize from distance. Over time, the behavior feels familiar, not rare, appearing across friendships, families, workplaces, quietly normalized. Moments arrive when reactions feel automatic, disproportionate, strangely disconnected from adult reasoning or consequence. What seems like failure to grow often guards something learned long before growth was possible. Mental immaturity is commonly framed as laziness, low intelligence, or refusal to change, yet psychology suggests it often reflects a survival strategy preserved under pressure. Growing up mentally is not guaranteed by age, education, or experience. It depends on whether reflection ever felt safe enough to develop. Psychologist Carl Jung observed that parts of the psyche remain frozen at the age where adaptation became necessary for survival. What appears childish is often a preserved emotional response that once prevented pain, rejection, or chaos. A brief scene unfolds during conflict. Raised voices escalate quickly. Logic disappears. One person storms out mid-conversation. The reaction feels juvenile, yet its speed suggests reflex rather than choice. Mental growth requires tolerating discomfort, ambiguity, and delayed emotional relief. When those states once felt dangerous, the mind learns to avoid them permanently. Another moment appears at work. Feedback is offered calmly. The response arrives defensive, sarcastic, dismissive. Observers interpret this as immaturity, but internally it shields against perceived humiliation. Behavioral scientist B.F. Skinner noted that behaviors followed by relief tend to repeat regardless of long-term cost. If emotional regression once reduced threat, the brain stores it as efficient. Mental adulthood involves integrating emotion with reasoning, yet integration demands emotional exposure. Avoidance preserves safety but halts development. A family gathering reveals the pattern clearly. Minor disagreements trigger sulking, blame shifting, or exaggerated reactions. Everyone adjusts quietly, stepping around emotional volatility to preserve peace. This accommodation unintentionally freezes the pattern in place. Evolutionary psychologists suggest early humans favored quick emotional responses when threat felt imminent. Reflection came later, once survival stabilized. When early environments never stabilized, reflection never fully arrived. Another snapshot appears in friendship. Accountability is requested gently, humor deflects, seriousness dissolves into jokes. Laughter replaces responsibility, tension fades temporarily. The pattern succeeds socially, yet growth is postponed again. Mental immaturity is rarely about inability to learn, more often about inability to stay present during emotional stress. Stress collapses the system back into familiar protective modes. This regression feels natural because it once worked. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described how meaning protects the psyche under threat. When maturity threatens identity stability, regression supplies meaning instead. Being right feels safer than being reflective. Being reactive feels safer than being uncertain. Being defended feels safer than being examined. A public interaction shows this clearly. Criticism arises, tone sharpens instantly, posture stiffens, conversation shifts into dominance. Observers sense emotional age drop suddenly. The person feels composed afterward, as if equilibrium returned. What returned was not calm, but control. Control substitutes for growth when growth feels unsafe. Mental development requires repeated exposure to emotional discomfort without catastrophic consequence. When that exposure never happened, the psyche preserves earlier solutions indefinitely. The behavior becomes identity, not habit. This is why reasoning alone rarely changes it. Reason targets the surface, while the adaptation lives deeper. Some people will recognize this immediately because the pattern feels painfully familiar. What remains hidden is how early and precisely this freezing occurred. The deeper origin of arrested mental growth formed long before adulthood ever began. If you're still watching, you probably notice things most people miss. You question behavior. You look beneath the surface. If that sounds like you, subscribe. This channel was made for minds like yours. The origin of arrested mental growth rarely begins with choice. It forms when early environments demand survival before reflection becomes possible. Childhood does not teach maturity directly. It teaches safety, and the brain remembers which states preserved it. Evolutionary psychologists suggest young minds adapt rapidly to threat by prioritizing predictability over complexity. When emotional unpredictability dominates early life, the mind learns speed instead of depth. A quiet scene appears in childhood. A caregiver's mood shifts suddenly. Warmth becomes anger without warning. The child scans constantly, learning vigilance rather than understanding. Mental growth requires stable feedback. Inconsistent feedback trains anticipation instead. Another moment unfolds at home. Emotional expression is mocked, punished, or ignored. Vulnerability becomes liability. The child learns to perform reactions rather than process feelings. Psychologist Carl Jung observed that development halts where the psyche experiences overwhelming threat. The mind preserves that stage as a safe operating system. Social learning compounds this effect. Peers reward impulsivity, punish sensitivity, reinforcing emotional shortcuts. A schoolyard memory forms. Confidence earns approval. Hesitation invites ridicule. Certainty becomes armor. The brain stores these outcomes without narrative, only results. Behavioral science shows that repeated emotional relief strengthens neurological loops faster than reflective insight. Relief becomes the teacher, not accuracy. Another micro scene appears. A child apologizes once and receives humiliation instead of repair. The lesson becomes clear. Accountability is dangerous. From then on, deflection replaces responsibility automatically. Attachment theory suggests that when caregivers cannot co-regulate emotions, children self-regulate through rigid patterns. These patterns reduce anxiety but narrow emotional range. Mental flexibility never fully develops under constant threat monitoring. Adolescence amplifies these adaptations. Social hierarchies reward dominance and reaction over introspection. Impulsivity signals confidence. Emotional restraint signals weakness. The brain refines these signals for survival within groups. A teenager interrupts conversations frequently. Peers laugh. Authority feels earned. Reflection feels unnecessary when reinforcement arrives consistently. Over time, these responses compress into reflexes, triggered before conscious awareness intervenes. The individual feels normal, even competent, within these reactions. The cost remains invisible because it never registers as danger. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described how meaning shields individuals from psychological collapse. Here, immaturity supplies meaning by maintaining internal consistency. Growing up mentally would require dismantling that consistency. The brain resists this dismantling fiercely. What once protected attachment now protects identity. The adaptation survives because it worked too well. By adulthood, the original thread is gone, yet the pattern remains active. Stress reactivates it instantly, bypassing reasoning entirely. A partner's tone resembles early criticism. The mind regresses automatically. The reaction feels justified because history rides inside it. Mental age drops not from weakness, but from conditioned survival recall. These origins remain unseen because they feel personal, not historical. Yet they shape how the individual now appears socially. The next layer reveals how these early adaptations surface clearly within adult relationships and power dynamics. These early adaptations surface most clearly within social spaces, where behavior becomes visible long before its origin is understood. In friendships, emotional reactions often feel exaggerated, yet internally they feel proportionate to an invisible past. A casual disagreement escalates suddenly. Volume rises, certainty hardens, retreat feels impossible. Others sense intensity without context. The individual feels cornered, even when no attack exists. In close relationships, this pattern appears through avoidance, defensiveness, or sudden withdrawal after minor emotional exposure. Intimacy triggers the same threat systems once activated by caregivers. A partner asks for clarity, silence answers instead. Silence feels safer than explanation. Family gatherings reveal it sharply. Authority figures provoke regression rather than dialogue. Adult bodies host childlike reactions. A simple correction from an elder sparks irritation disproportionate to the moment. The room feels smaller, time compresses. Work environments magnify these dynamics through hierarchy and evaluation. Feedback feels personal, neutral language feels loaded, guidance feels controlling. A supervisor offers redirection, the response becomes rigid compliance or quiet resistance. Growth conversations become battlegrounds. Evolutionary psychologists suggest status threats activate survival circuits faster than physical danger. Here, immaturity disguises itself as confidence or stubbornness. Peers often notice the pattern first. They describe someone as dramatic, difficult, or emotionally stuck. The description points outward, rarely inward. Social power rewards these traits at times. Decisiveness masks fragility effectively. Meetings move faster when nuance disappears. Certainty dominates over curiosity. A colleague interrupts frequently, dismisses alternatives, gains perceived authority through forceful simplicity. Few challenge it openly. Friend groups adjust around the behavior unconsciously. Plans bend, conversations soften, conflict is avoided. The adaptation reshapes the environment to maintain itself. Romantic dynamics intensify this loop further. Partners feel responsible for emotional stability they did not create. Caretaking replaces reciprocity quietly. A small disappointment triggers sulking or blame. Affection becomes conditional. The partner senses imbalance but struggles to name it. Public settings reveal subtler forms. In traffic, impatience surfaces instantly. Perceived slights feel intentional. Strangers become antagonists briefly. These moments pass quickly, leaving justification behind. Psychologist Carl Rogers noted that defensiveness increases when self-image feels threatened. Here, the self-image is fragile yet armored. Reflection feels unsafe. Most people recognize these patterns first in someone close. The discomfort arises from familiarity rather than understanding. Modern life does not create these behaviors. It amplifies and rewards them quietly. Modern systems quietly reward emotional shortcuts, reinforcing patterns that once functioned only as temporary protection. Speed replaces reflection, reaction replaces processing, certainty replaces nuance. Digital environments compress time and distance, removing natural pauses once required for emotional regulation. A message arrives without tone, ambiguity fills the gap instantly. The nervous system responds before interpretation can stabilize. Social platforms reward immediacy, not integration. Strong reactions travel further than measured responses. Outrage appears confident. Restraint appears invisible. A post receives attention through sharp certainty. Complexity dissolves into applause or rejection. The behavior feels validated externally. Neurological loops strengthen through repetition. Each rewarded reaction shortens the distance between stimulus and response. The brain learns efficiency over maturity. A disagreement online escalates rapidly, language hardens, identity fuses with opinion. Walking away feels like erasure rather than choice. Algorithms mirror survival instincts precisely. They amplify threat signals, tribal belonging, emotional certainty. Nuance does not trend well. Evolutionary psychology suggests the brain struggles to distinguish symbolic threats from physical ones. A comment feels like danger, disagreement feels like attack. Modern culture frames growth as dominance rather than integration. Confidence is displayed through refusal to reconsider. Changing one's mind feels like social death. Workplace incentives follow similar patterns. Speed is praised. Deliberation is mistaken for weakness. Leaders who project certainty rise faster than those who tolerate ambiguity. Meetings reward the loudest clarity. A quick decision receives credit. Long reflection appears inefficient. Emotional immaturity hides behind productivity metrics. The adaptation gains status. Entertainment culture mirrors this reinforcement. Characters are celebrated for impulsive certainty, not inner development. Emotional restraint reads as boring. Complexity becomes slow television. A viral clip shows confrontation without consequence, resolution without accountability. Viewers absorb scripts unconsciously. Family structures shift as well. Boundaries blur between adult and child roles within households. Parents distracted by survival pressures outsource emotional modeling to screens. Children observe reaction without repair. The pattern transfers generationally without words. Psychiatrist Donald Winnicott described how environments shape emotional holding. Modern environments hold poorly. Constant stimulation leaves little space for internal digestion. Silence feels unfamiliar. Discomfort seeks immediate discharge. A notification interrupts reflection before it deepens. Emotional tension exits through expression rather than understanding. This appears functional. Internally, integration stalls. Romantic scripts intensify under cultural pressure. Passion is equated with volatility. Calm is mistaken for disinterest. Conflict becomes proof of connection. Partners confuse emotional chaos with intimacy. Repair becomes secondary to expression. Public discourse mirrors these dynamics collectively. Debates become performances, certainty becomes currency. Admitting uncertainty feels like forfeiting identity. Groups polarize rapidly. Belonging replaces understanding. The adaptation scales upward. What once protected a child now shapes communities. Psychological costs remain largely invisible. Relationships thin beneath constant emotional discharge. Trust erodes quietly. Burnout emerges without clear cause. The nervous system stays activated without resolution. Psychologist Herbert Freudenberger described exhaustion without meaning as corrosive. Here, exhaustion feels justified. The individual remains busy reacting. Stillness feels threatening. Moments of quiet invite unresolved material forward. Avoidance becomes structure. Modern life does not confront the pattern directly. It cushions it. It offers endless distraction. It calls adaptation strength. Yet beneath performance, the original fear remains untouched. Awareness begins not with correction, but with recognition. Something feels familiar here, and familiarity rarely remains external. Recognition does not arrive as clarity. It arrives as discomfort that refuses to dissolve quickly. The behavior no longer feels distant. It sits closer, woven into familiar reactions. What once appeared childish now feels structurally intelligent. The nervous system protected continuity when integration felt unsafe. This reframing unsettles identity. Maturity becomes less about age, more about tolerated uncertainty. Psychologist Carl Jung observed that avoided aspects return as fate. Here, fate looks like repetition. The same conflicts replay with different faces. The same defenses activate regardless of context. Growth stalls not from ignorance, but from protection working too well. A moment of tension arises during disagreement. The body tightens before thought forms. Words prepare themselves defensively. Listening narrows. The reaction feels justified. Later, unease lingers without explanation. Awareness notices this residue. Another scene unfolds quietly at home. A partner expresses frustration, tone sharpens, withdrawal follows instinctively. Distance feels safer than repair. Silence masquerades as control. The pattern completes itself without reflection. At work, feedback arrives neutrally. The chest constricts. Interpretation turns personal. Professional critique transforms into identity threat. Productivity continues uninterrupted. Internally, something closes. Awareness does not correct this automatically. It simply observes. Evolutionary psychology suggests the brain prioritizes survival over coherence. Integration requires tolerance of temporary instability. The system resists that cost. This resistance feels like personality. It feels earned. Letting go of familiar defenses resembles loss rather than gain. Something once necessary may no longer be precise. Yet removing it feels dangerous. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described freedom as the space between stimulus and response. That space remains narrow here. Widening it feels unfamiliar. Not choosing reaction exposes vulnerability. The absence of immediate certainty feels like falling. Modern identity relies heavily on defended narratives. Softening them threatens coherence. So awareness lingers instead of acting. It notices cycles without interrupting them. This stage feels unresolved by design. No instructions emerge. No transformation occurs instantly. The pattern does not dissolve under observation alone, but it no longer hides comfortably. A subtle tension remains present now, not demanding change, not offering relief, simply visible. And visibility alters nothing immediately, except the illusion that it belonged only to others.